Auctions.com.
I love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry and all else. I love property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
With all that we know in the year 2026 about the corruption in government and in the only areas the labor extortion mafia thrives, in government work. It is amazing to me, amazing, that we still are dealing with these labor extortion mafias called unions. I mean it. It is ridiculous that in the year 2026 we still pretend like none of us can read about the corruption, the bastardization of pensions, the thievery, and the lack of productivity of labor extortion unions. Now, I was in 4 unions. I don't slam the worker, but they know, I know, and my next guest knows that the upper echelon is good at nothing other than perfecting the skim. He is the president of the National Right to Work Committee, which has 2.8 million members. He is Mark Mix. Mark, how are you, handsome?
Shaun, I am doing well, and I know that your head never explodes when you start uncovering stuff like this or talking about it, but this one really is an amazing piece of corruption. And we tried to do something about it. We won 2 U.S. Supreme Court cases that were supposed to solve the problem. But to your point, in 2026, we still have union officials skimming dues money out of Medicare money across the country, and we're trying to do something about that.
Of workers that either don't work or don't exist. You know, this is the part that you have to talk about. You're skimming from fictitious workers. You know, this is fascinating to me when you think about these Somalians. Let's just take this one group of degenerate people. And sorry, but Yar, if 80% of you are on welfare and the other 20% are skimming and stealing through policies, as far as I'm concerned, the only way you could exist is if the government is in on it. And whether the IRS doesn't tag these entities that pop up over nowhere and pretend to service thousands and thousands of Americans that don't exist and aren't there, or they have workers, and those workers are somehow paying union dues? Is that what you're telling me? Just out of Medicaid alone, that California, $146 billion in a 2.5-year period. Everybody's in on the fracking scam, aren't they?
Well, it appears to be that way, Shaun. And the biggest player here, though, is the Service Employees International Union. This goes back to Illinois' former governor, Rod Blagojevich, who, when sworn into office, immediately signed an executive order that allowed the SEIU to skim Medicaid stipend money from family members who were taking care of disabled children that, in their own home. And so
let me just put a pin in that. Let's put a pin in that. And I'm going to tell you why, all right? In my neighborhood, there's friends of mine who I like. They tell me he's not so bad, that chipmunk face-looking bastard. Dick Mel's son-in-law. He's not so bad. He caught a raw deal. Get the frack out of here, that scumbag. This is the kind of skim he set up, and everybody pretends he's a victim? I mean, that whole thing where you have to you could take care of your grandmother the way you should anyway if you're any kind of decent human being, or your wife or your husband or the rest of it. And now they're in the union and this skim is going on. Really, I'm going to tell you what, Mark, I hate even, I got to go back every time. I go back a lot. I hate it for that reason. The climate and the acceptance of the skim is across the aisle, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. There seems to be a lot more people in on this than we would like. And Shaun, so we had a Supreme Court case after this Blagojevich scheme, and then the Illinois legislature passed it as a statute after the executive order was struck down. And they said that these home health care providers are quote-unquote government employees for one purpose and one purpose only, to pay union dues to the Service Employees International Union. We took a mom who was taking care of her developmentally disabled son all the way from the district court all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And in 2014, the U.S. Supreme Court agreed with us in a case called Harris v. Quinn, Quinn being the replacement governor for the corrupt Blagojevich, basically saying these people, First Amendment protected them from being forced to pay dues or fees in order to take care of their children in their own home, and protected home health care providers from this due skim. Unfortunately, it continues even after another Supreme Court case in 2018 that we argued and won, saying that no government employee, even if you classify these people as government employees for one purpose and one purpose only, to pay union dues, they can't be forced to do that anymore. But right now, the Trump administration sent out letters to 9 states, including Illinois, where this scam continues, saying we need an immediate audit of everyone that you're taking union dues from in the Medicaid system, because the statute says there can be no third party in between the Medicaid money and the recipient that gets it for care. But yet the unions somehow have positioned themselves in the middle of this and skimming off up to $15 to $45 a month from stipends for workers that are, getting paid for a couple of hours here and there, where the money has to be paid to the union, and they get it before the employee, quote unquote, never ever sees it. It's a scam.
Well, and we break it down like that, right? So it's 50, 40, 45 or $50. But what's the total number of people in on this scam? It's got to be in the, if it's not hundreds of thousands, it's millions.
Yeah, hundreds of millions of dollars for sure are it's going on here in the union dues only. The $100 million, because Medicare is what in the state of California is you already mentioned, it's the single largest budget item, I think, in the entire budget out there. And so if you can skim off 10% of whatever the $1 billion net is, that it's a pretty good business deal for the unions. I mean, it's great revenue. There's no question about it. Yeah.
When's the last time? I could fill up a show of just the upper echelon of labor extortion mafias stealing money, stealing from the pension, stealing from the workers. But, it's fascinating to watch how in Illinois, Michigan, so many times they're protected by the government themselves. I mean, if you are a true scumbag, you only exist in these states. And that's why when we break down, I break down the economy, and I love the fact that it's growing. But if you really look at this, Mark, and you look at the fact that I think it's 74 to 76% of our GDP is made out of 11 states now. 11 states. Not one union corrupted. Not one union mandated. I mean, at a certain point, the people are going to have to recognize, if you're going to be in the mafia, that's as good as you're going to get, is that low-living mafia life of extortion and a useful idiot that you are for a name on a piece of paperwork so they can skim. I can't get over in the year 2026 it goes on. It's fascinating to me that there's even a discussion. And how could a state freeze out the information, which is what Illinois does? They freeze out the information. Yeah. I mean, it's preposterous to me, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it absolutely is. And they now have a deadline, these 9 states, including Illinois. California's in that group, and you know the rest of them, Washington, Oregon, Illinois, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Minnesota, New York, and Missouri. Those are the states that this letter has gone out saying, you need to give us an audit of this program immediately by August 6th, otherwise we're going to withhold this money. And so hopefully the Trump administration is doing something about it. When they were in the first term, they corrected the problem. They stopped it. Of course, Biden coming back into office immediately reinstituted the program for the unions to do this due skim.
Well, that's how he got in.
Yeah, they changed the regulation to make it easier for the unions to do it. We're asking the Trump administration to fix it again. They have yet to do that, but this is a good first step and probably will uncover literally, Shaun, hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud.
Well, who was the ones that worked on all the voting machines? Wasn't that in Illinois and all these Democrat areas? They're all union guys, right? That's the only ones that could touch a machine. Yeah, I mean, get the hell out of here.
Yeah, SEIU government employees, yeah, right.
Oh, Mark. How does listen, I survive because I can rationalize and flight of foot, right? At a certain point, we're going to have to recognize either you correct this yourselves or the rest of us have to stop paying for it, because the other dirty little secret is it only exists on the federal money that is subsidized to these welfare mafia-run states. These states cannot exist on their own. They do not exist on their own. The idea that we pretend Illinois somehow is financially solvent, it's a bankruptcy doom loop and has been for decades. So are all these other states. I mean, is there a way when you talk and you win these cases, we win Supreme Court cases, these are big deals that you're taking on, kid. I mean, I'm proud of you. But ultimately, what's the result? I'm here in Florida, and I pretend I don't pay for it, but I do, and so does everybody else, don't we?
Yeah, you do. And, that your point is well taken, Shaun. At some point, we just got to say, no, we're not paying for it anymore unless we can fix it or understand it. But transparency is the first part of that. I mean, folks that run the Leering Center up in Minnesota have never been held accountable, and union officials never get held accountable. To your point, Shaun, it's the rank-and-file workers that are opposing this more than anybody else because they get it. They're the ones that are affected by this. But the union officials, they're the ones that are living high on the hog, and they're the ones that are continuing to facilitate this corrupt scheme where if unionism was voluntary instead of compulsory, like it is since 1935 in the United States of America, we could clean up that mess too. I'm sure of it, because accountability is the first step in making a difference and changing things, I think. And there's no accountability right now. It doesn't.
Well, it loses on every single argument. But what I also love too, and for the first time in American history, they're starting to see. And when I say they, I'm talking about the actual workers who are really the victims and the perpetrators all at the same time. They're victims because the way it really works, they're not really getting ahead to the way that they could in a private sector, in a growth sector where they were incentivized to be exceptional. They couldn't really get ahead as much as they could if they, in fact, could direct that union pension money that they pretend they get a deal on. In fact, the 99% of the reason that they stay there, and I talk to a lot of listeners of mine are union guys, and they understand because they're just as pissed off as I am and you are about the whole circumstance. But the reality is it's legislated. To be in this position, in order to work, you have to be part of this syndicate. So that's something that we've challenged to the idea, and it kind of works, but it kind of doesn't, because so much of the policies that went out during the illegitimate years, the Biden years, were there. So I really think, and this is me and you talking, I really think that once we can validate the fact that Joe Biden was illegitimate, all of these so-called laws and bills and all this nonsense he signed to substantiate and pour money into it, it would then be null and void. That's a way we could stop it, too. We could actually stop the bleeding by recognizing the reality that Joe Biden was illegitimate in the first place. It's really a big deal if Trump goes ahead and we present the evidence, and it's irrefutable, as I've always believed it is, that Joe Biden was illegitimate and stole the election. That could actually have ramifications to these union guys who want to break the system of corruption, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I think we're going to hear more about that tomorrow night. At least I expect that we are. We'll see. We'll see.
Yes.
But you're right. Yep.
And when you compare private sector growth, private sector retirements, private sector 401ks, Roth IRAs, and different ways people can set up their retirement when they're young and when they're working, and you compare it to the union actual results of what they pay out on their pensions, the only thing that even makes it somewhat attractive is the health care costs. Other than that, their pensions for the actual worker, it's not any more spectacular than he could have done in a Vanguard 401k, is it?
No. And in fact, if it weren't for the taxpayers, most of those multi-employer pension funds across the country would be bankrupt or out of business right now. Joe Biden shepherded through a $94 billion taxpayer bailout of multi-employer pensions across the country. And the biggest recipient, Shaun, you won't be surprised, the Teamsters got almost $45 billion to save the Central States Fund, which is Illinois in that area, the Western States Fund, and other, quote, Teamster locals where their pension was going to be cut because Obama signed a bill that said you could cut these pensions right at the tail end of his career. No one mentions that. But if it weren't for $94 billion of taxpayer money, there would be a lot more hurt across the country for rank-and-file union members who depend on that quote-unquote promised pension fund that the union officials sell so great. Oh, you got a great pension. Well, we got a great pension because the taxpayers paid for it now.
You've got me fuming, and I'll tell you why. I went to a wake recently, and I saw one of these morons I grew up with who's a big union freaking guy. He had the vest on like a guy. What are you, a guy? You a businessman? You a gangster? The innuendo of these clowns having this kind of power to get these bailouts after they steal the fracking money. They hire their moron politician money bundlers to misappropriate the funds. It really fries me. And I would think, I remember growing up and dealing with it to a certain extent. And I kept thinking to myself, well, ultimately back then, we had capitalism. It was thriving. It was unarguable. You had options. You could grow up in this area and have options to be legitimate, or you could be a part of this problem, right? As it was always discussed by religious good people in parochial schools. As I call it, you could be a scumbag or you could not be. Now, as you look at these areas, where's the private business? You look at our area. Where's the private business in Chicago? Where is it? They're all closing. Yeah. Where are the private companies? They're all gone. Same thing in New York. Same thing in New Jersey. At a certain point, aren't people going to get sick and tired of this obvious innuendo of corruption and acceptability of it, these clowns? See, I don't tolerate it. I told them, come on, you were a clown when we were kids. Just because you got a vest on from the Men's Warehouse, you're still a fracking moron. I mean, that's at a certain point, we're going to have to realize reality, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's happening. It's happening. And you speak of private sector job growth in right-to-work states that won't allow forced unionism, is double that of forced unionism states. Manufacturing job growth, those jobs that really make the country run, and the things that high school graduates are looking to get into when they, most of them are looking to get into because they're good-paying jobs. That's 10 times in right-to-work states, 10 times the private sector manufacturing growth in right-to-work states versus non-right-to-work states. 10 times.
That's an insane, staggering reality. And, this is kind of the beauty. As aggravating as it is, and as much as you've made my bald spot bigger, this is also the beauty because the fact is in the reality. The fact is in the result. The result simply is if you are good at something and you want to be paid to be good at something, you cannot be in these labor extortion mafias. You can't. If you want to be in on the scam, then you must be. And I kind of like that. And that's where it's devolving to. And I'm wondering, do you think that's a way for you to get more members? I want you to have 280 members of guys in all kinds of places that want the right to work without being extorted by these half-assed pansies. By the way, the kid I'm talking about, he couldn't win a fight in a phone booth with a wet paper bag. All of a sudden, they're tough guys. I really think it's time to stand up against this corruption and really put the nail in what it is. It's political corruption, and it exists because of it.
Yeah, absolutely, Shaun. That's our mission. We keep trying to fight for this. We're making progress. We've got 26 states. More than half the states have right-to-work protections for workers. We've got right-to-work protections for every government employee in the United States. If state leaders will tell them about it, other than lock them in the rooms and make them sign cards saying, yeah, I got to be a member of the union to be a home health care provider, if they stop doing that crap, I think we'll be okay. We'll make progress. We do it whether it's the litigation, whether it's the legislation. But in Illinois, it's going to be a problem. You know that. And I don't like Blagojevich because he does have good hair. I don't, but he does.
Yeah, but he looks like a chipmunk.
Reason not to like him.
He's got that chipmunk, smarmy, beady-eyed bastard. And how about Paint Chips Pat Quinn? He should be on a lead-based paint disclosure, that stupid-looking son of a pig. Anyway, I think a little suggestion for Mark Mix and your website. I think you should list, and I just speaking on the value of your life, on what you cannot get back. Real estate values, real estate taxation, and the cost of living of all the right-to-work states versus the collapse of commercial real estate in these Democrat mafia-run states, the insane disconnect of the ad valorem tax system, and the true cost of living among the corrupt. I think by that alone, if you could see it side by side, there's only one choice to make, and that's to support the Right to Work Committee and Mark Mix. What's the name of the site?
NRTWC.org, Shaun. NRTWC.org.
You tell everybody there I appreciate it. I love these organizations because you guys are right down to earth with the rest of the workers. There's no elbow patches on your sport coat, is there?
No. No. That's right. I was talking with a pipeline contractor today about how I worked in an 8-foot pipeline at a dam up in New Mexico, checking for failures in the coating and lining system a mile up a pipeline. I mean, yeah, everyone thinks I'm anti-union. I grew up in a union household. My stepfather was a 32 member of the machinists union. I mean, I thought my bread was buttered that way, but it isn't, and it wasn't, and it was compulsion, and we paid the price after he passed away, found out that the promises weren't real. And that's where we are.
To watch the extortion and the real effort of the honest worker in a dishonest union is something to see. I'll never forget that bricklayers union, what they did to those bricklayers with their pension, those rat bastards. They stole their fracking pension. It just was sickening. And that's why you fight. You fight because we grew up around the honest worker. It's the only way to be. Mark Mix, you know how much I appreciate you and the National Right to Work Committee. Thank you very much for making time.
Thank you, Shaun. Stay angry, my friend.
Oh, it's all the way I sleep. Thank you. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
Make money, smoke cigars, and live free on the Shaun Thompson Show on AM 560. The Answer.